Good morning. It's time to open God's Word again. So let's turn to Colossians chapter 3. And today we're going to look at verse 22 through to the end of the chapter. Bondservants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in sincerity of heart, fearing God. And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. But he who does wrong will be repaid for what he has done, and there is no partiality. Bondservants, or as your translation may say, slaves. And that's quite a foreign concept to us today in this 21st century Western society, isn't it? You know, and thankfully, we don't see that happening much today, although we need to be aware that it does happen illegally, of course. But this was the reality of the first century Greco-Roman world. And Paul has been dealing with the household. He's been talking about the relationship that exists between a man and wife and how they're to relate to one another. He's dealt with the children, how they are to relate to the parents, and also how the parents are to relate to the children. And now he needs to deal with the slaves or the bond servants, because the truth is that many households had bond servants. You can see in Paul's letter to Philemon, it's dealing with an issue that went on with a slave, one of Philemon's slaves, Onesimus, that apparently did wrong to his master and fled. And then Paul encourages Philemon to receive him back. He has an experience with Christ. He goes back with this letter. Paul encourages him to receive his slave or his bondservant again. So it was a reality of that particular world, that particular society. And Paul needs to address it. What does he say? He says, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in sincerity of heart, fearing God. And you may be thinking, how on earth does this apply to us if we don't have a recognized slave class within our society? How does it apply to us? Well, let me suggest to you that it can apply to our working lives. And you might feel like a slave sometimes in your working life. Hopefully you're not treated like a slave. But anyway, it's all about the attitude of the heart. It's the way that we go about our work. Whether or not we see it as service unto the Lord, or whether we're just doing it out of obligation to please men. And Paul's He's very specific here. He talks about the attitude of the heart. It's not just about when you're being watched, that you're doing these things out of obligation. But he's saying, do it in sincerity, with sincerity of heart. How can I do that? He's saying, do it unto the Lord. Do it unto the Lord. What does he say in verse 23? And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord, and not to men. And you know, the truth is sometimes as Christians we tend to separate like the spiritual, what we claim or what we think to be the spiritual, from the daily mundane tasks of work and so on. But actually our worship involves and includes our work. I'm speaking from experience here because God had to deal with me quite severely sometimes. I worked for about 12 years in the steel industry, and I just remember how difficult it was to go every day and just be in that environment. You know, sometimes we weren't really treated with the respect that we expected from those managers or our bosses or whatever. And very often, you know, I would get it wrong and end up responding in like manner. But then the Lord started to minister to me about certain attitudes in my heart. And I remember having this kind of like, I don't know, I was complaining to the Lord one day about the way I was being treated and so on. And then the Lord just kind of just orientated me, just directed me to start to recognize authority, to submit myself, to serve, And even if I felt that the individuals didn't deserve that respect, then I still had to learn to serve as if unto the Lord. And so that's my advice today, is whatever God has given you to do, wherever you are, know that you are a witness in that place, and your attitudes, your actions, your words bear witness to Christ. And if you can, or if we can try to change our understanding and think, well, I'm not here just to serve these men or women. I'm here to serve Christ. My work, whatever it is part of my worship. Remember, worship, it can't be restricted to a specific place and a time on a Sunday in a church building. It has to be a lifestyle. And so Paul's addressing that. He's saying, it's all about your heart, all about the attitude of your heart, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. But he who does wrong will be repaid for what he has done, and there is no partiality. In other words, God is watching. God is seeing. God is weighing up the motives of our heart. He's weighing up the attitudes. And so we need to bear that in mind, and we need to understand that maybe you don't feel appreciated by your boss at work or whoever, but know that the Lord is watching, and that ultimately the Lord will reward you for your faithfulness. So maybe you need to maybe you need to adjust your thinking a little bit. We all do. So just be blessed. Have a wonderfully blessed day.